This, of course, is not easy, but as a workable way forward, it has more prospects of success than any amount of enforcement. Amongst the most successful ambassadors in this are young people. Inspire their enthusiasm, and they will inspire their peers and elders. An example of this was the successful campaign that was launched by the mayor of Sibiu to combat the fashion of replacing traditional wooden windows and shutters with plastic types. This campaign ran alongside training programs in the crafts associated not just with carpentry, but with other trades that are essential to the conservation of historic buildings. Key management issues in historic cities today include the role of historic cities and quarters and their relationship to their modern counterparts, harmonious coexistence through strategic planning, both 2- and 3-dimensional, modern interventions, harmonious integration through mutual respect, both scale and design, scale and proximity of functions through prioritization of small-scale mixed use and detailed planning, including protection of artisan activities, housing, which is generally the dominant historical use in historic cities in floor space terms, protecting the function as well as the social and cultural mix. Sustainable relationships, strive for think global, act local, reduce, reuse and recycle, and stay close to source, and avoid domination by tourism. The United Kingdom is sometimes portrayed internationally as a standard of excellence in the field of heritage protection, especially in terms of its laws, regulations and guidance. I should be flattered. In fact, I explain this portrayal as the result of good marketing. The evidence of the number of joint UNESCO-ICOMOS missions to investigate concerns expressed by the World Heritage Committee should help to put the record straight. It is certainly true, in my biased opinion as a native of Britain, that from the technical point of view, conservation philosophy and practice in the United Kingdom are exemplary. Strategically, however, the protective system is fragmented and weak. The system of national designations includes individual ancient monuments, listed buildings, and parks and gardens. This is separate from the system of local designations, which is the only mechanism that permits the designation of conservation areas and the very often limited level of protection that such designations afford. These fragments are only recognized for their architectural or historic interest. Internationally recognized terms such as values, authenticity and integrity form no part of the vocabulary, and whereas continuity of functionality is interpreted, it forms no part of the core legislation. Most importantly, there are no provisions under United Kingdom protective legislation for overarching designations for historic cities. Indeed, not only are there no standard instruments for controlling building heights in historic cities, government guidance requires municipalities to have proactive tall buildings policies. Such is the recipe for confrontation that we foster. In Liverpool in 2008, I led a conference workshop which posed within the United Kingdom context a simple question. Planning systems, do they fit the current needs of historic port cities? The unambiguous response from an English heritage professional in the audience was simple. No, they do not fit the needs of any historic city. Personally, I look to examples of good, holistic, historic city practice from countries other than my own. I have been asked to conclude, well, almost, this lecture by reciting the manifesto that appears on my website. Urban conservation and sustainability, the challenge for the 21st century. The December 2009 United Nations Climate Change Conference, the Copenhagen Summit, recognized that climate change is one of the greatest challenges facing the world today. The world's demographic profile has now surpassed a defining threshold. For the first time, 50% of the world's population lives in cities, a proportion that is forecast to increase steadily in the decades ahead. This urban half of the human population accounts for 3/4 of the world's annual consumption of resources and discharges of wastes. Cities, therefore, constitute an important starting point for a sustainable world. Their continuously accumulating cultural heritage, ancient and modern, has a vital role to play in meeting this challenge. Historic buildings in urban areas constitute not merely a non-renewable cultural resource, they also represent a non-renewable capital resource of materials, embodied energy, and financial investment. Further, they constitute an essential functional resource, one that has been demonstrated time and time again to be highly adaptive to creative use. By combining our concerns for the heritage value of historic buildings, urban areas, and their infrastructure with the wider environmental imperatives of respecting the finite material resources of our planet and the threats posed by global warming and climate change, the rationale behind the protection and conservation of our heritage is reinforced and magnified many times over. Two further influences contribute to this reinforcement of the value of protection and conservation. Firstly, increasing emphasis in our globalizing world on cultural diversity, and secondly, recognition of the intangible values that attach to human traditions and practices. These support an approach to cultural evolution that is focused at least as much on processes that require to be sustained as on artifacts and monuments to be preserved. This human approach, characterized as the anthropological vision of geocultural identity and cultural continuity, reinforces the rationale and processes of conservation and integrates them with the creative dynamics of human societies. It focuses on people as both the custodians and creative vectors of cultural diversity and identity. Building on the classic definition in the 1987 Brundtland Report, sustainable development is today recognized to have four components: environmental protection, economic growth, social equity, and cultural continuity. My book, Conservation and Sustainability in Historic Cities, seeks to identify and highlight the opportunities for conservation and sustainability to work together in a partnership of strength for the achievement of common objectives, and for architectural and urban conservation to position itself as a determining component of sustainable development. My current research, publication and practical focus is on the extension of this theme to embrace the challenge of climate change. Finally, we should not be thinking in terms of visual integrity in historic cities versus economic development. Rather, visual integrity in historic cities an essential requirement for economic development. For historic cities to be economically successful in today's increasingly competitive world, they need to take full advantage of their individual distinguishing qualities. It is no longer sufficient to copy one's competitors, it is essential to stand out from them. Historic cities start with one enormous advantage: their unique inherited qualities. Lose those and all is lost. Thank you very much.